The stars stretched out in a never-ending sea of light as the human fleet approached the Zoreth system. The galaxy was in chaos, with empires at war and alliances constantly shifting. The Zoreth, one of the most powerful alien factions, had long seen humans as weak, insignificant, and easy to ignore. But that perception was about to change. Sergeant Alaric stood on the bridge of the human warship, staring out at the vast expanse of space. He was just a soldier, nothing more, nothing less. He had seen battles, both won and lost, and knew how to survive in the cold emptiness of space. But today, his life would change in ways he couldn't yet understand. A sudden transmission buzzed through his headset. The voice that spoke was calm, almost too calm, given the circumstances. Sergeant Alaric, prepared to receive a gift from the Zoreth. Alaric blinked. A gift? What kind of gift? He had heard stories of strange diplomatic exchanges. But this was something new. Before he could ask for clarification, the transmission cut off. The crew exchanged confused looks, unsure of what to make of it. Minutes later, the massive Zoreth ship appeared in view, its sleek form casting a shadow over the human fleet. It was a magnificent vessel, larger than anything Alaric had ever seen. A sense of awe washed over him, though he quickly pushed it aside. He was a soldier, not a diplomat. His job was to follow orders, not question them. Then the docking bay doors opened. Alaric's breath caught in his throat as he saw her. The Zoreth princess, Vera, stood at the entrance, her alien features unlike anything he had ever imagined. Her skin was pale and smooth, a soft shade of lavender that shimmered under the artificial lights. Her long flowing hair was silver, with streaks of deep violet running through it. Small, delicate ears, shaped like an elf's, poked out from beneath her hair. She was stunning, impossibly beautiful, yet there was something unsettling about her presence. Vera walked slowly, her steps graceful but purposeful. Her gaze was cold, as if she had seen too much of the galaxy's cruelty to believe in anything good. She didn't speak to Alaric, nor did she acknowledge anyone else on the ship. She was a princess, and the weight of her title was as heavy as her silence. Vera, a voice called from behind her. A high-ranking Zoreth official stepped forward, addressing the humans. "She is your gift, Sergeant Alaric. The Zoreth royal bloodline has decided to honor your victory by offering Princess Vera to you. She is yours now to do with as you please." Alaric was stunned. A princess, given to him as a gift. This wasn't just a token of victory. It felt like something else entirely. The room was thick with tension as Vera stood motionless, her eyes distant. It was clear that this gift was more of a political gesture than a reward. But what did it mean for Alaric? What did it mean for the princess? As the official finished speaking, Alaric could only nod. "Understood," he said, though the words felt hollow. Vera's eyes met his for the briefest of moments, and in that instant, Alaric saw something beneath her cold exterior, a flicker of fear, perhaps. But it was gone before he could be sure. The princess was given to him. But as Alaric looked at her, he couldn't help but wonder, what had he truly been given? The days following the arrival of Princess Vera were strange and uncertain for Sergeant Alaric. He had been assigned to a small, quiet quarters on the ship, where he was expected to live. But now, that quiet space felt anything but peaceful. Vera's presence weighed heavily on the room. She was there, but distant, physically and emotionally. Every morning, Alaric would wake up early, trying to maintain a routine that had kept him grounded through countless battles. He would check his equipment, review reports, and prepare for whatever mission might come next. But then, at the end of each day, he would find himself in the same room as the princess. Vera sat by the window, her gaze fixed on the stars outside, as if they held some kind of answer to her unspoken thoughts. She didn't speak much. In fact, she barely spoke at all. It was as though she was lost in another world, one where humans didn't exist, or one where she had long given up on hope. Alaric tried. He really did. He attempted to engage her in conversation, to find a way to bridge the cold silence that lay between them. But every time he opened his mouth, she simply ignored him or gave short, emotionless replies. He had never dealt with someone like her before. An alien princess, seemingly full of grace and beauty, yet so closed off. He wasn't sure what he had expected. Maybe he thought she would be grateful, happy, or even curious about the human soldier who was now her caretaker. But instead, she acted as though she was trapped in some invisible cage, locked away in a world of her own making. "Princess Vera," Alaric said one evening as they both sat in the small quarters, the silence too much to bear. "What happens now? You're here, with me. What do we do?" Vera's eyes remained fixed on the stars outside, her expression unchanged. She didn't acknowledge him right away, as though she hadn't even heard the question. Alaric waited, not sure if she would ever respond. Then, after a long moment, she spoke. "You don't understand," she said softly, her voice distant but laced with sadness. "I was never meant to be a prisoner in my own life. This is not what I wanted. But now, I have no choice." Her words hit Alaric like a punch to the gut. He had heard rumors about the Zorith royal family and their complex political games, but this was the first time he had heard it from her directly. She wasn't just a gift or a political pawn. She was a woman, trapped in a system she had no control over. Alaric didn't know how to respond. He could tell she didn't want sympathy. She wasn't looking for someone to save her. She simply wanted to be understood, even if that understanding came with a price. "I'm not here to control you," Alaric said carefully, hoping to find some common ground. "I'm not your enemy. I don't want to treat you like a prize. We're both stuck in this situation." Vera finally turned to look at him, her eyes dark but not unkind. For a brief moment, there was a flicker of something in them, something vulnerable, hidden deep beneath the surface. But just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. "Stuck," she echoed softly. "Yes, that's one way to put it." And with that, the conversation ended. Alaric sat back, feeling more lost than ever. He was beginning to understand that this wasn't going to be easy. Vera was not just a cold, distant princess. She was a woman trapped in a life that had been decided for her long before she was born. But as the days passed, Alaric knew one thing for certain. He had to find a way to break through her walls, no matter how high or thick they seemed. For now, though, he would wait, and he would learn. The days grew longer as Sergeant Alaric tried to get used to the silence that filled the quarters. Vera's cold demeanor was always there, like a heavy curtain that hung between them. She was distant, her eyes often lost in the vastness of space, her mind seemingly 1,000 light-years away. But Alaric, despite the distance, was determined to learn more about her, about the woman who had been thrust into his life without warning. One evening, when the ship's artificial lights cast long shadows over the room, Alaric sat down across from Vera. He knew she wasn't going to speak unless he gave her a reason. He took a deep breath, trying to push aside the frustration that had built up over the past few days. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to," he began, his voice soft. "But I'm curious. How did it all happen? You, being sent here, I mean." Vera didn't move, didn't even glance his way. For a moment, Alaric thought she might ignore him, as she usually did. But then, to his surprise, she spoke. "Do you know the story of the Zorith Empire?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How we rose to power." Alaric shook his head. "I've heard the stories, but they're just that. Stories. Legends about your people's strength and advanced technology." Vera nodded slowly, a shadow crossing her face. "It's true. We were powerful. But power doesn't always come without a price." She finally turned her gaze to him, her violet eyes locking onto his. There was a coldness in them, but also something more, something deeper. "My family was once loved by the people. My mother was a queen, beloved by all. And my father was a king who conquered worlds with a mere thought. We had everything. Wealth, power, respect. Alaric sat quietly, listening intently, sensing that this was the beginning of something important. Vera had never shared this with anyone before, he could tell. Her voice grew quieter, and there was a tremor in it, an emotion she was trying desperately to suppress. But then my father became too ambitious. He sought to expand the empire beyond what we could control. And in his greed, he made enemies. Enemies within his own council. They betrayed him. She paused, her lips tightening. And in the end, they betrayed me. Alaric could hear the pain in her words, and he instinctively reached out a hand. But Vera quickly withdrew, as if his gesture had been a reminder of something painful. They killed my family, she continued, her voice cold again. I was the only one left, and because of my bloodline, I was cursed. No Zorith would marry me. They believed I was barren, that I could never bear an heir. So I was cast aside, a princess with no throne, a ruler with no subjects. Alaric felt a deep sense of sympathy, though he wasn't sure if he should show it. He wasn't here to be her savior, but hearing the weight of her past made him realize just how little he knew about the world she came from. Vera wasn't just an alien princess. She was a woman who had lost everything, including her hope. You see, Vera said, her gaze drifting away again. I was never meant to be a prize. I was meant to be forgotten. Alaric sat back, stunned by her words. The woman in front of him, so cold, so untouchable, was not the heartless creature he had first believed. She had been broken by forces beyond her control, and now she had no idea where her place was in this galaxy. I'm sorry, Alaric murmured, though he wasn't sure if those words were enough. Vera didn't respond right away. She simply looked out at the stars, her face unreadable. For the first time, Alaric felt like he was starting to understand her, not as a princess or a symbol of an empire, but as a person who had been lost, just like him. The quiet moments between Sergeant Alaric and Princess Vera began to change. The silence that had once felt suffocating started to shift, becoming something more like an unspoken understanding. As the days passed, the two of them grew more accustomed to each other's presence, even if words were still few. Alaric continued his attempts to reach Vera, though it was clear she wasn't interested in engaging much. She had her own world, one that she refused to share. Yet, over time, he noticed small changes. She would sometimes glance at him, not with the icy detachment she had before, but with something closer to curiosity. Still, her walls remained strong, unyielding. One evening, as they sat in the dimly lit room, Alaric broke the silence again. You know, I've been thinking, he began, glancing over at her. You've never really told me what you want. What do you want out of all this? Vera didn't answer right away. She looked out the window at the stars, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Alaric thought she might ignore him, as she had done so many times before. But then she spoke, her voice quieter than usual. I want to be free, she said softly, her gaze still fixed on the endless stretch of space. I want to be more than just a symbol. I want to live, not just survive. I don't want to be locked away like some forgotten relic of a dying empire. Her words struck Alaric like a lightning bolt. He had expected her to say something cold, something dismissive, but instead, she had opened a small window into her soul. He could see it now, the pain, the longing, the desire for a life beyond what she had been given. But was it too late for her to find it? I understand, Alaric said, though he knew there was still so much about her past, that he didn't understand. But do you think that's possible? Freedom, I mean. After everything that's happened. Vera finally turned her gaze toward him, her eyes softer now. I don't know, she admitted, but I can't keep pretending that I don't want it. I can't keep hiding behind the mask of a princess who has no purpose. She paused, her voice trembling ever so slightly. I've spent my life being told who I am, what I should be. And now, I don't know who I am anymore. Alaric could see the struggle in her eyes. Vera was more than just a princess in a cage. She was a woman searching for her own place in a world that had forgotten her. She had been pushed into a role she hadn't chosen, and now she was fighting to break free from it. The princess who had once been feared, revered, and adored by her people was now a shadow of herself, torn between the past and the possibility of a future she could never have imagined. For the first time, Alaric saw Vera as more than just a political pawn. She was human in a way he hadn't expected. She was fragile, hurt, and confused, just like him. And despite everything, despite her coldness and her silence, he couldn't help but feel drawn to her. But as the days wore on, the tension between them grew. It wasn't the kind of tension that could be easily ignored. It was a quiet, simmering kind of tension, the kind that built up over time, feeding off of every unsaid word, every moment of eye contact, every shared silence. They were both standing at the edge of something they couldn't yet see, and neither of them knew how to take the next step. One evening, after another long day, Vera spoke again, her voice barely audible. "I don't know what's worse," she said, her tone heavy with uncertainty. "Living in a cage or knowing you've already been forgotten." Alaric looked at her, his heart heavy with a sympathy he hadn't known he was capable of. "You're not forgotten," he said quietly. "Not by me." Vera didn't respond, but the look she gave him lingered long after she turned her attention back to the stars. For a brief moment, Alaric felt like he had finally reached her, but the uncertainty still hung in the air, thick and unspoken. The silence stretched between them, but it no longer felt quite as empty as before. As the days passed, the bond between Sergeant Alaric and Princess Vera began to grow, slowly but surely. It wasn't dramatic or sudden, but it was real. The silence between them, once thick and suffocating, began to feel less like a barrier and more like an unspoken understanding. They had both been thrust into this strange situation, and while neither of them had chosen it, there was something about it that made them start to trust each other, little by little. It started with small gestures. Alaric would leave her little messages. Nothing grand, just simple notes to show he was thinking about her. Sometimes it was a drawing of the stars they had seen in passing, other times a description of something he had learned about Earth. Vera, for the first time since arriving on the ship, began to respond, though her responses were short and clipped at first. It was as though she was testing the waters, unsure of how much she could reveal. Then, one evening, Alaric found her sitting by the window once again, her eyes fixed on the endless void outside. But this time, there was something different about the way she sat. Her posture was a little less tense, her expression less guarded. She seemed lost in thought, and Alaric hesitated before speaking. "You know," he began, sitting down across from her, "I've been thinking about what you said before. About freedom." Vera didn't turn to face him, but acknowledged his presence with a quiet nod. "Freedom," she repeated softly, as if savoring the word. "It's a strange thing to want when you've never truly known it." Alaric studied her closely. There was a sadness in her words, a longing for something she hadn't been allowed to experience. It made him wonder, had she ever known a life where she was truly free, where she wasn't bound by the weight of her title or the expectations of her people? "Do you think it's possible?" Alaric asked, the question hanging in the air. "I mean, can someone really break free from everything they've known?" For a moment, Vera was silent, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of the window. "Maybe," she said slowly, "but it's not easy. Freedom isn't something you can just take, not without consequences, and once you choose it, you can't go back." Alaric nodded, understanding her meaning. There was no going back once the choice was made. She had been a princess, but now she was something else. Someone who had to decide if she wanted to fight for the future she dreamed of or remain a prisoner to her past. "I don't want to be a prisoner anymore," Vera said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't know how to let go of the past. It's too much, too heavy." Alaric leaned forward, his voice gentle. "You don't have to do it alone. For the first time, Vera met his gaze. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, something almost like hope, though it was quickly masked by the walls she had built around herself. "I've been alone for so long," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "I don't know how to trust anyone anymore." Alaric's heart ached at the rawness of her words. He understood. He had lived through battles, fought wars, and lost comrades, but nothing had prepared him for the emotional weight of the situation he now found himself in. "You don't have to trust me right away," he said. "I'm not asking for anything. But I'll be here. No matter what happens, you won't have to face it alone." Vera's eyes softened, and for the first time, a small tentative smile tugged at the corners of her lips. It was the first real sign of emotion he had seen from her in days. It wasn't much, but it was something, and it meant more to Alaric than anything. "Thank you," she whispered, the words almost lost in the stillness of the room. And for that moment, in the quiet of the night, they shared something more than words. They shared a connection, a fragile but real bond that had started to form between them, built on understanding, respect, and a promise that neither of them would face the future alone. Days turned into weeks as Sergeant Alaric and Princess Vera continued their quiet, growing bond. Their conversations became more frequent, the silence less uncomfortable. Vera still held a guarded air, but there were moments, fleeting but real, when she let her walls down just enough for Alaric to see glimpses of the woman she once was. Yet, neither of them could have anticipated the turn their lives were about to take. It began with small signs, changes Vera tried to ignore at first. Her body, once so controlled, seemed to betray her, showing signs that she couldn't explain. A sudden wave of exhaustion would hit her in the middle of the day, followed by sharp, strange pains in her lower abdomen. At first, she brushed it off as stress from the endless tension of her situation. But the symptoms persisted, and soon she couldn't ignore them any longer. One evening, after a particularly long day, Vera sat quietly in her room, clutching her stomach. The pain had intensified, sharp and unyielding. She could feel her pulse racing, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She had never felt anything like this before. There was a part of her, deep down, that feared what it might mean, but she refused to believe it. She had been told her whole life that she couldn't bear children. It was a curse, an inevitable truth. Alaric knocked gently on her door before entering, as he had been doing for weeks now. He had become accustomed to her silence and her solitude, but he had also learned to read the small signs, the way her eyes darted nervously when she tried to hide her discomfort. "Princess," he said softly, concern in his voice, "are you all right?" Vera didn't answer at first. She sat still, staring at the floor, as if gathering the strength to speak. Finally, she looked up at him, her eyes dark and clouded with confusion. "I don't feel well," she whispered. "Something's wrong." Alaric crossed the room in an instant, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "What's happening? Tell me." Vera took a deep breath, her hand still pressed to her stomach. I don't know, but it feels like something's inside me. Something growing." Her voice faltered, and for the first time, Alaric saw the fear in her eyes. I thought I was barren," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I was told I couldn't have children." Alaric's heart skipped a beat. The revelation hit him like a blow to the chest. Vera had always spoken of her past, of the curse that surrounded her, but he had never truly understood its depth until now. The princess, his unexpected companion, was carrying something she thought was impossible. "Are you sure?" Alaric asked, his voice low with disbelief. He tried to remain calm, but the weight of the situation pressed heavily on him. Vera nodded slowly, her eyes welling up with unused tears. "I'm scared, Alaric. I never wanted this, but now I don't know what to do." Alaric stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to say. He wasn't a doctor. He couldn't offer any real answers. But there was one thing he was sure of. Whatever this was, whatever it meant for Vera, he would stand by her. No matter the consequences, No matter the danger, he would protect her. "You're not alone," he said, his voice firm with a promise. "We'll figure this out together. I won't leave you." Vera stared at him for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she nodded, the fear in her eyes giving way to a fragile hope. But as the days passed and the symptoms worsened, neither of them could ignore the truth any longer. Vera, the princess who had been declared barren, was pregnant, and the news would have far-reaching consequences, ones that neither of them could predict. The Empire, the Zorath, would not look kindly on this. A royal bloodline thought extinct was now alive, growing inside her. This child, this unexpected heir, was a game-changer. It was a truth that would shake the foundations of their world, a truth that neither Vera nor Alaric could avoid. And with that realization, they knew their lives would never be the same again. The news of Vera's unexpected pregnancy spread quickly throughout the ship. Though the crew knew little of the royal politics that had once defined her life, they could sense the change. The atmosphere in the quarters where she and Alaric lived grew tense, thick with the weight of something neither of them fully understood. Every day, Vera's condition worsened, the pain in her abdomen growing sharper, the mysterious changes in her body more noticeable. Alaric could see the fear in her eyes, fear not just of the physical changes she was experiencing, but of the consequences. The idea of carrying an heir, something she had been told was impossible, now felt like a curse. What would this mean for her? What would the Zorath Empire think? And more importantly, what would they do? Vera spent most of her days sitting by the window, staring out at the stars, lost in thought. Alaric, though troubled by her silence, could do little more than watch. He wanted to help, to make her feel better, but there was nothing he could do for her now. This was something bigger than either of them. One evening, Alaric sat beside her. The soft hum of the ship's engines, the only sound breaking the silence. Vera's eyes were distant, her hands resting lightly on her stomach. "Vera," he said softly, breaking the stillness. "You know that I'll protect you. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Vera turned to look at him, her expression filled with sorrow. "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "This changes everything. I've already lost so much, Alaric. And now I'm carrying something that could either save me or destroy me." Alaric could see the conflict in her. She had always been a warrior at heart, strong and resilient. But this was different. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for a future she wasn't sure she wanted, and for a child that could either be a symbol of hope or the beginning of a new kind of power struggle. The Zorath Empire had a strict hierarchy, and the royal bloodline was sacred. Vera had been cast aside as a barren princess, unworthy of a future or a legacy. But now, with this child growing inside her, things were changing. The Empire had never anticipated this. They had assumed her bloodline was dead, that no heir would come from her. But Vera wasn't just a princess anymore. She was a living symbol of everything the Zorath had thought they controlled. And that was dangerous. "I know it's scary," Alaric said quietly, his hand resting on hers. "But we'll figure it out. We'll find a way. You're not alone in this." Vera shook her head slowly. "You don't understand. I've been a pawn in their game for so long, Alaric. My life has never been my own. And now I have something they'll want, something they'll take if they can. They won't just let me live peacefully with this child. They'll want control, and they'll come for me, for us." The words hit Alaric hard. He had known that their lives would never be easy, but he hadn't considered how far the Empire would go to keep control. Vera's child, the heir to a throne that had once seemed out of reach, was a symbol of everything the Zorath would fight to keep: power, control, and the legacy of a dying empire. "You can't think like that," Alaric said, his voice firm. "You can't live in fear of what might happen. We have to focus on what we can do now together. We'll protect this child, Vera, and we'll protect you." Vera's eyes softened, though doubt still clouded her expression. "And if they come for us, what then?" "We fight," Alaric said simply, his voice full of conviction. "Whatever it takes, we fight." For a long moment, Vera was silent, her gaze fixed on the stars once again. The weight of their future hung in the air between them, but in that silence, there was also something else, a sense of resolve, however fragile. "I don't want to be afraid anymore," Vera whispered, almost to herself. "I don't want to hide." And for the first time, Alaric saw it, the flicker of determination in her eyes, the glimmer of hope in a future she could control. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind him that they were no longer just victims of fate. They had the power to shape their own destiny. And whatever came next, they would face it together. The tension in the air was palpable, and Alaric could feel it in every room he walked into. The crew on the ship had become more watchful, their curiosity about the princess's condition growing with each passing day. The news of her pregnancy had spread, and with it, the whispers began about what it meant for her, for the Zorith Empire, and for the future of the galaxy. But for Alaric and Vera, the whispers didn't matter. What mattered was the growing uncertainty about their future. As much as Alaric wanted to reassure her, he couldn't ignore the truth. The situation was becoming more dangerous. Vera's child, her hair, was a powerful symbol, one that would undoubtedly attract attention from forces far beyond their control. Late one evening, as the ship cruised quietly through space, the door to their quarters slid open. Vera stood by the window, her expression distant, her mind clearly far away. Alaric entered and stood beside her, watching as she gazed at the stars. The sight, so vast and beautiful, always seemed to calm him, but tonight, it felt like a reminder of the challenge they faced. "I've been thinking," Vera said quietly, breaking the silence. Alaric turned to her, sensing the seriousness in her voice. "About what?" "This child," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I spent my entire life running from the past. I've never had control over anything. But now I have something that could change everything. And I don't know if I'm ready for it." Alaric's heart ached for her. She had always been a symbol of strength, a woman who had lived through betrayal and loss. But now, as a mother-to-be, she was vulnerable. The fear in her eyes was something he had never seen before, something he wasn't sure how to fix. "We're in this together," he said softly. "Whatever happens, we'll figure it out." Vera nodded, but her eyes remained clouded. "But the Empire won't let us go easily. They'll come for me, for my child. And if they do, I won't be able to protect you, Alaric. I can't bear to watch you suffer because of me." Alaric stepped closer, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "You don't have to carry this burden alone, Vera. We're both in danger now, but I won't let them take you. I won't let them take our future." Just then, a sharp beep from the communication console interrupted them. Alaric looked toward the screen, his body tensing. It was a secure transmission from the Zorith Empire, a message that could only mean one thing. The higher-ups in the Empire had learned of her pregnancy, and they were preparing to act. Vera's breath caught in her throat, her face paling as the message began to play. A cold voice came through, unmistakably the voice of a high-ranking official from the Zorith Council. "Princess Vera, we have been informed of your condition," the voice said, the tone flat and emotionless. "It is of utmost importance that you return to the capital immediately. You are required to appear before the council. Your status as heir will be recognized, but only under the condition that you comply with the Empire's wishes. Failure to do so will result in consequences too severe to ignore." Alaric's fist clenched at his side. He had known this was coming, but hearing it, seeing it made it feel all too real. Vera stood frozen, her hands trembling. "They'll come for us, won't they?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Alaric didn't hesitate. He took a step closer to her, his resolve firm. "Yes, they will. But we're not going anywhere without a fight." For the first time in weeks, Vera looked at him with a strength he hadn't seen before. Her eyes were no longer filled with fear. Instead, they burned with something more powerful: defiance. "They think they can control me," she said, her voice steady. "But they don't know me. They don't know what I'm willing to do to protect my child." And in that moment, Alaric knew that everything had changed. The princess who had once been a pawn in the Empire's game was no longer that person. She was someone new, a mother, a fighter, a force to be reckoned with. And together, they would take the fight to the Empire. "Let's get ready," Alaric said, his eyes filled with determination. "This isn't over yet." And as he looked into her eyes, he knew it wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for freedom, for their future, and for the family they were about to build together. The tension on the ship had reached its peak. Alaric could feel the weight of what was about to happen pressing down on him every time he walked the halls. The message from the Zorith Council had made it clear they were coming. And once they arrived, they would not just take Vera back to the Empire. They would take everything from her, everything she had fought to protect. Vera, on the other hand, was different now. She wasn't the princess who had been hidden away in silence. She was a mother, a protector. She had made a choice, and that choice had sparked a fire within her. She was ready to face whatever came next, ready to fight for her child, for their future. But even with her newfound strength, the reality of the situation was clear. The Zorith fleet was vast, their influence far-reaching. Alaric knew they were no match for the full force of the Empire. Yet it wasn't just about fighting. It was about outsmarting them, using the very power they thought they controlled to turn the tide in their favor. As the ship drifted through the quiet expanse of space, Alaric met with Vera in the command center. It was their last chance to plan before the inevitable clash. They had to decide what they were going to do. "I know we can't win in a direct battle," Vera said, her voice calm but determined as she looked over the holographic map of their position. "But we don't have to. We just need to outlast them long enough to reach the neutral zone." Alaric nodded. The neutral zone was a remote part of the galaxy where neither the Zorith nor any other faction had claimed full control. It was a place where they could disappear, where they could regroup and find allies who would fight beside them. If they could make it there, they would have a fighting chance. "But the Zorith know we're headed there," Alaric pointed out. "They'll expect us to make a run for it. We need a diversion." Vera smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes that Alaric hadn't seen before. "I've been thinking about that. If we send out a decoy signal, we can make them think we've split off into smaller groups. We'll divide their attention, and then we move when they least expect it." It was risky, dangerously so, but it was the only option they had. They couldn't afford to be predictable. They had to outthink their enemies, confuse them, give them no choice but to chase shadows. Alaric looked at her, feeling a deep sense of pride. This was no longer just a battle for survival. This was a fight for something far greater. And Vera, with all her strength and determination, had become the symbol of that fight. "Let's do it," he said with a firm nod. "We'll send the decoy out at 600 hours. You get the ship ready for the jump. I'll handle the crew." As the plan took shape, Alaric felt a new sense of purpose. They didn't have to win this fight on strength alone. They had something more powerful: the ability to adapt, to change the rules of the game. Vera's hand found his, her grip steady. "Thank you, Alaric," she said softly, "for believing in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself." "You're not alone anymore," Alaric replied, his voice full of certainty. "And you never will be." The ship hummed as preparations began. With each passing minute, the walls they had built around themselves, the walls of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, began to crumble. Vera, the princess who had been abandoned, had become the leader of a new hope. And together, they would fight to protect their future. As the stars outside began to blur into streaks of light, Alaric knew one thing for sure: whatever came next, they were ready, and they were not backing down. The ship moved faster through the vastness of space, its engines humming in steady rhythm. Alaric sat at the helm, his eyes focused on the glowing path ahead. The plan had been set in motion, the decoy signal sent, and now they were in the final stretch. Every minute counted. They had to reach the neutral zone before the Zorath fleet realized they had been missiled. Vera stood beside him, her eyes on the same distant stars. She had always been a princess, a figurehead to others. But now she was something more, something no one had expected. She was a mother, a protector, and the key to a future that had been taken from her long ago. And her child, the unborn heir, was more than just a symbol. It was a living, breathing hope for a new beginning. "We're almost there," Alaric said, his voice steady but filled with anticipation. Vera nodded, her hand resting lightly on her stomach. The journey had been long, the fear constant, but now, with the neutral zone almost within reach, she could feel a sense of something new, something that had been missing for so long. It wasn't just the safety of escaping the Zorath. It was the idea of freedom, of being in control of her own destiny. For the first time in her life, she felt the weight of her choices in her hands, not the decisions of others. As they neared the neutral zone, the ship's alarms suddenly blared. Alaric's heart skipped a beat. "They found us," he muttered under his breath. The Zorath fleet had arrived much faster than expected. The decoy had done its job for a while, but it wasn't enough. They were being hunted now, the Empire closing in. Vera stood taller, her face hardening with resolve. "We can't outrun them forever," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "But we don't need to outrun them. We need to show them that we're not just prey to be captured. We need to fight back." Alaric turned to her, meeting her eyes. "What do you have in mind?" Vera moved to the ship's control panel, her fingers flying across the keys as she brought up the tactical map. "The neutral zone is protected by a network of old defense systems, ones the Zorath haven't bothered to maintain. If we can access them, we can turn the tables." Alaric's mind raced. It was a long shot, but it was their only shot. They couldn't just run. They had to stand and fight, using the very technology the Empire had left behind. If they could hack into the system, they could disable the Zorath fleet long enough to slip through. "You're right," Alaric said. "Let's do it." The ship's engines roared as they approached the neutral zone. Vera worked quickly, her hands steady despite the adrenaline rushing through her. Alaric kept his focus on the Zorath ships on the radar, watching as they closed in. The moment of truth arrived. Vera's fingers slammed down on the final key. The ship lurched as the defense systems activated. Explosions erupted in space around them as the once dormant systems came to life, disrupting the Zorath fleet's communications and navigation. In the chaos that followed, Alaric seized the opportunity. "Now," he shouted, "get us out of here." With a quick maneuver, the ship shot forward, weaving through the debris as the Zorath ships scrambled to regain control. The path ahead was clear. Just ahead, the neutral zone was in sight, a place of safety, of freedom. As they crossed the boundary into the neutral zone, Vera exhaled, a long, steady breath that felt like the first true release she had experienced in years. "We made it," she whispered. Alaric looked at her, his heart full of pride. Together. They had done it. Against the odds, they had escaped. But this was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and there would be challenges ahead. But with their son on the way, with their bond stronger than ever, they were no longer just running from the past. They were stepping into a new future, one that they would build one step at a time. And as the stars stretched out before them, Vera knew that no matter what came next, her legacy, their legacy, had only just begun.